Welcome to the Xan Shoob podcast, where we discuss all things college football. My name is Xan, this is my co-host Shoob, and today, once again, we have our guest host, Mr. ZKS. Welcome in, thank you for coming. Great to have you. Today we'll be discussing the Pac-12 win totals. Shoob, do you want to kind of run us down how we're going to go through this whole system and discuss these win totals?
Sure thing. So it's just like the rest of our win totals videos. We are wrapping it up here. This is the last win totals vid that we're going to be doing. Very happy to run through the Power Five. So with the Pac-12, of course, with ZKS joining us, he will be in the Z column. Xan, as always, is in the X column, and I will be in the S column. And we're going to alternate back and forth and kind of open it up for discussion as we pick over or under for each team's win totals. You can see the lines there. These are based off of Caesars Sportsbook as of today's date, which is August 9th. So without further ado, we're going to start up right up at the top with USC, the Trojans, coming in with a line of 9.5 wins. Keep in mind, these are just for the regular season. These are 12 games that these lines are based off of. That's what we're going to be picking. So USC, 9.5. Xan, what do you got?
USC is a very interesting team. We all know they got a lot of attention this offseason with the exodus of Lincoln Riley and half the Sooners team. When I look at their roster holistically and I look at their schedule, there is a lot to be excited about over there at USC. They were absolutely terrible last year, but Lincoln Riley, I really do think he's a great coach despite of all the things that are being said about him or what people think about him. From a coaching perspective, I think he can really put together USC. I see 3 stud transfers all at the wide receiver position for USC, in addition to already having Caleb Williams. They have Jordan Addison. Everyone knows who Jordan Addison is. He won the Biletnikoff. It's a huge ad. They brought in 5-star Mario Williams from OU. They brought in Brendan Rice, who was an underrated transfer from SMU. They have a stacked wide receiver group. USC also stole Oregon's star running back, Travis Dye. That's a huge loss for Oregon. 1,000-yard rusher. Again, USC Trojans picking up, getting richer and richer and richer. When you look over at their offensive line, it's also stout, led by Andrew Voorhees. And then you look at the people they lost. They did lose some people to transfer portal, like Jackson Dart and Michael Trigg, but ultimately what they brought in far supersedes what they lost. And they have such a talented roster. ZKS, Shoob, when I look at this roster and I compare it to the rest of the Pac-12, I think they have the most talented roster in the Pac-12, hands down. Granted, there is a new system to be implemented. There's a whole culture that has to be implemented there. But ultimately, when I look at their schedule here, they play Rice, they play Stanford, they play Fresno State, Oregon State, Arizona State, Wazoo, Utah. Then they get the bye, and they get an easy slate of games against Arizona, Cal, and Colorado right off the bye before they have to play UCLA and Notre Dame. I really think that this team, they don't have to play Oregon. That's something that's really going to help them in the schedule. And because they don't have to play Oregon, that's one less potential loss that I can put on there. I really think between Wazoo, Utah, UCLA, Notre Dame, those are the biggest threats for them. And I think they'll win at least 2 of those games. And with that being said, that puts them at 10-2. I'm on the over.
Xan, I agree with that pick completely. I as well am on the over. You've got Caleb Williams coming in, and you've given him an arsenal of wide receivers in the Pac-12. They're going to shred through probably every defense except Notre Dame and Utah, which are 2 question mark games that I do have. But in my, analysis of their schedule, you could drop those 2 and you're still going to hit the over. My only concerns from a scheduling standpoint is, let me take a look here. They get Oregon State early, and Oregon State historically has proven that they can take down USC. And getting this Beaver team, who I'm personally high on this year early, could be a bit of a stumbling block potentially for the Trojans, especially in year 1 of Lincoln Riley. And I'm also concerned about UCLA because that's a rivalry game. And in rivalry games, anything can happen. But all that being said, I still think their 2 toughest games are before their bye with Utah and at the end of the year with Notre Dame. But I'm really high on Caleb Williams, really high on this offense, and I'm really excited to see what Lincoln Riley does on the West Coast.
So this USC team last year, when you're talking about their players that are returning off of last year's team, it's really hard to judge what last year's team really was, because last year they went 4-0, and Clay Helton, he was basically a lame duck coach going into last season. And they fired him after the second week of the season. If you guys remember that, they lost to Stanford after the second week, and Helton got the hook. And this team really didn't really play the hardest the rest of the season. Of course, with Lincoln Riley, I think that if you're going to judge this team, of course the offense is going to be good. Of course, Caleb Williams and these receivers, it's going to be elite. But guys, there's this thing that also matters in football. There's also this unit called a defense that takes the field half the time when the offense is not on the field. And USC's defense is not going to be good. I repeat, they are not going to be that good. I feel like everyone is sort of just looking at Caleb Williams and Mario Williams and Jordan Addison and the offense and looking at those shiny gadgets they got, but just completely disregarding the defense is not going to be good at all. And Lincoln Riley did the best that he could to try to, leverage the portal and bring in those guys. They only returned 3 starters defensively. They were 107th in schedule adjusted defensive efficiency last season. And Riley did bring in Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator from Oklahoma, to man the defense and play call there. But the thing with Alex Grinch is that it really took him a while to build the defense at OU. If you guys recall, OU was having problems with the defensive struggles when they first took over, and Grinch, it took him like 3 or 4 years to finally sort of get it going. And now he's inheriting a defense that was pretty bad. So I think the defense will still be pretty poor this year. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that USC isn't going to be elite offensively, but I am on the under here. I knew that I'd probably be the guy that disagrees here with you two, but I think that this defense is really going to hold this team back. In another year or so, I think Lincoln Riley will probably get it going. But even though the schedule is somewhat favorable, I think that this team's probably going to lose 3 games. And then also you look at the team's depth. The depth really isn't that great. Lincoln Riley still has a little bit of work to do. I know they play the Pac-12 schedule and everything, but depth is a major concern for USC. And I bet the under here with my personal money. I got a good line at 9.5. So I just think that 3 losses is way more likely and possible than what everyone thinks.
Shoob, I respect your point, and it is worth noting. I mean, it is the old mantra that defense wins championships. My counter to that would be, though, is even against a team like Notre Dame, I don't even know if Notre Dame would have enough offensive firepower to keep up with USC. And I think in playing in a league like a Pac-12 where you're playing Colorado, Cal, Arizona, I think you can get by on mostly just having offense. Now against maybe Utah, that's one of those you probably need a defense because Cam Rising will light you up. So I do respect and understand your point. I just think given the schedule they play, they could get away in these first couple of years not having a solidified defense.
And just to what Zeke said, I mean, Utah and Notre Dame are the biggest question marks on their schedule for me. I think the Notre Dame point, as far as you said, depth is an issue. They play Notre Dame late, so that could be an issue for them if they're playing with injuries. So Notre Dame would certainly have an advantage in that game. But Shoob, I'm more on the side here that they'll probably lose to Utah. They'll probably lose to Notre Dame. I don't see them losing to anyone else on their schedule. I see maybe some close games, but from a talent perspective, I mean, they still brought in a lot of guys defensively in the transfer portal as well. I mean, this team has a complete overhaul. And so just because they don't have a lot of returning starters doesn't mean that they aren't talented on that side of the ball. And I think ultimately they were so dreadful on defense last year. You can only improve with the players that they brought in. So for me, I really think that USC is a 2-loss team, man. I really don't see them losing another one just based upon their schedule. And I'm with ZKS on this, but I don't know. It remains to be seen, but it's going to be interesting to watch moving forward.
Let me ask you guys this. Which team is better? Just straight up talent. 2022 USC or 2021 Oklahoma?
I'm going to go with USC.
Okay. I would say Oklahoma is probably better. Their defense last year was a lot better than what USC's got this year. Last year's Oklahoma team, even with Caleb Williams, even when Caleb Williams took over second half of the season, they still struggled to beat teams like Baylor. They still couldn't beat Oklahoma State. They couldn't even get to the Big 12 championship game. We have to keep in mind that Oklahoma didn't lose a single game with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. Now, I know obviously Williams is better than Rattler, but Oklahoma really wasn't that great of a team last year, and I don't see this USC team being any better than Oklahoma was last year. So how am I expect them, a team that wasn't as good as OU last year, that couldn't even make the Big 12 championship game, win 10 games
Well, for me,
with
Shub,
USC.
I'm down on a lot of the Pac-12 this year. I think there's talented teams in the Pac-12. Don't get me wrong, but I think there is so much turnover that a lot of these teams are going over with their coaching staffs, their rosters. I just don't think that these teams are going to be able to match up. I mean, Lincoln Riley, first year at USC. There are some other teams over here that play USC on their schedule that are dealing with turnover as well. And I think it works over for USC. I think in this particular year, just because of all that turnover, it gives USC that advantage. If it wasn't a year like that, I'd be leaning more towards the under. But when I look about how just all the coordinator hires and movement in the Pac-12, I just see a lot of instability in other programs.
All right, that's fair. I mean, I'm fine to play devil's advocate. I know that this thing opened at 9 wins, actually. It bumped up to 9.5. If the line was still at 9, I actually probably would have leaned over. But because it's at 9.5, I'm very confident in the under. I think that half a game is important. Now moving on here to Utah. The Utes coming in with a win total at 9 games. I will kick it off here. Utah, they really kicked it into gear last year when they made the change at quarterback from Charlie Brewer to Cam Rising. That happened about 3 to 4 weeks into the season, if I recall. And from that point on, Cam Rising really elevated this team, and this Utah team finished the year strong. They beat Oregon twice to win the Pac-12 championship, and then they went on that shootout against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. That was a classic. We all probably remember watching that game. Utah, there's a lot to like about them going into this season. They were number 7 in total efficiency last season. They were number 7th in the country, believe it or not, offensively, and number 21 in total defensive efficiency last season. Of course, quarterback Cam Rising returning, that's huge. He needs to stay healthy. If injury ends up being a concern for him, that could be a problem for this Utah team. The running back room, I like them. They're really good. The biggest concerns for me offensively is replacing a few starters on the offensive line. That was pretty good last year. And then as far as the defense, of course, losing Devin Lloyd at linebacker is really big. He was a first-round pick, and they only returned 5 starters. However, the thing that you have to really like about Utah is that you kind of have to trust the process with Kyle Whittingham. The guy has proven that he has very good, solid defenses every year. He can develop those guys. So even though they only have 5 returning starters off last year's defense, it's a pretty safe bet to say that there won't be too much of a drop-off because of Kyle Whittingham's defensive prowess. They have a good track record. And then as far as the schedule, opening up against Florida in the Swamp, that's going to be a fun game. Right now, they're about a 2.5-point favorite on the road. That will probably be a big game as far as this win total is concerned. However, I'm pretty high on Utah. They're one of the few teams in the entire country that's actually favored as of right now in every single game that they play. They're favored in every single game they play in the regular season as of now. Of course, that could change when the season starts. But with all that being said, this thing was down at 8.5 games earlier this summer. I hammered the over on this thing. I think Utah is a pretty safe bet to get to 10 wins. I think this could very likely be a 10-win team. And I am very confident in this Utah over. Even if they lose to Florida in the Swamp, I still think they can rebound from that and run the table in the Pac-12 and still get out of Dodge with only 2 losses. Give me the over.
Shoob, I'm with you on the over to push here at 9. I like having that push protection with 9. And for me, it is their schedule. The really only viable losses on this schedule to me are Florida, USC, and Oregon. And I just don't see them losing to UF in the Swamp with first-year head coach Billy Napier. They've had Oregon's number in past seasons. And then USC, I mean, if the defense really doesn't arrive, that is a game I am expecting Utah to win. I don't expect them to go undefeated by any means, but I definitely think they can win at least one of those 3 games. And just the job that Kyle Whittingham has done there is incredible. I mean, I could easily see him retiring there. I could not imagine him going anywhere else this late in his career and given his age. And I just think he's going to continue to do great things for Utah as they keep moving forward in the Pac-12. So I'm on the over for the Utes.
Yeah, 100% ZKS. When you go to Kyle Whittingham, I'm 100% on the Kyle Whittingham train. I mean, that man is 144 and 70 all time since he's taken the helm there. That man is basically their Mike Gundy. He's 11 and 4 in bowl games. He's comparable to like one of those coaches who's been at the same program for a long time and had sustained success with less. And so that's one thing I really like about Kyle Whittingham. And another thing, let's not discount this. Kyle Whittingham, great coach, but he's not solely responsible for that defense over there. They have another in-house Utah alum, their defensive coordinator, Morgan Scally. I'm not sure how you say his last name, but this man he's a Utah alum. I was asking myself, how come this man has not been poached? His record is just, his defensive record has been stout year to year, replacing talent. And no matter what, they still are a relevant defense from year to year. And the answer is he's a Utah alum. He's not going to leave. If anything, he's probably going to wait until Kyle Whittingham calls it quits to take over that position. So Utah has a lot of great in-house guys. They have a lot of continuity in their coaching staff. They have a great culture there. I really like the Utes. Again, Shoob mentioned Cameron Rising. You know me, I'm a ratio guy when it comes to quarterbacks. He has a 4-to-1 TD to INT ratio. That's absolutely fantastic. Tavion Thomas returns with his 1,100 yards of production and 21 rushing touchdowns. Let's not forget about that. And then let's not forget about their stud tight end, Dalton Kincaid. That dude's going to go to the NFL. He's a really good target, really big target, creates a lot of mismatches on the offense. So Utah is going to be formidable on both sides of the ball, especially playing that Pac-12 schedule. The only major loss that they've had is that Devin Lloyd loss from their defense. And I think they'll just reload. They're a great team. And when we look at that schedule, as you guys were alluding to, USC, Oregon, UCLA are the only bumps I see on there that they could potentially encounter. And I think they're going to go 3-1 in those games. I can't see them make 2-2 at worst, but 3-1 is where I think they're going to go in those games. And with that being said, that is clearly the over. I am with you guys 110%. Utah, I am completely bought in. I am drinking the Utah Kool-Aid. And I'll tell you what, it's an exciting time to be a Utah fan.
Utah 9-3 is a floor, very high on them. I don't see them losing more than 3 games. I'd be very surprised if Utah finishes 8-4 or less. This is a pretty good team, and a full season of Cam Rising. Give me that over. That's a great play. Even at 9 wins, I still like it a lot. So now let's move on to the Oregon Ducks. Oregon also sitting with a win total at 9 wins. Xan, we'll kick it off to you.
Oregon's going to be an interesting team this year. It's Dan Lanning's first year after accepting the job from Georgia. They lost Mario Cristobal to Miami, so there's going to be a little bit of turnover there, not only in the coaching position, but at the quarterback position. We've got Auburn transfer Bo Nix coming in. The question is, how good is Bo Nix? Is it a Ty Thompson play? Is it a Bo Nix play? What's going on here? Because I hear that they're high on Ty Thompson, but at the same time, what I've read is that they want to stick with Nix because he is the most experienced quarterback with playing at a high level or against high-level competition. So right now, it's Nix's job to lose. So that'll be interesting to see. ZKS, Shoob, there's a few things about this team I like. There's a few things I don't like. The main things that really stick out to me right now are CJ Verdell and Travis Dye being gone. Those were their 2 leading rushers, far and away, accounting for almost all their rushing production. And I mean, granted, they do have a transfer from Marquise Irving from Minnesota. He was pretty productive over there. And they also have Byron Caldwell, who's a young and promising guy. He showed some promise last year. And so it's not all lost at that position, but there are question marks just because we don't know what they're going to bring to the table. And then, you have the new defensive coordinator, Tosh Lapoy from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You've got a new offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham from FSU. I mean, this is complete turnover. This is what I was referencing when we're talking about USC. Granted, USC doesn't play Oregon this year, but this is what I was talking about. There's a lot of turnover in general in the Pac-12, and these guys are no exception. So let me just state this. New head coach, new OC, new DC. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Shoob, did I mention that I hate it? Because this just spells so much inconsistency and so many growing pains, so many different coaching styles, so many different schemes that all these players are going to have to come together to learn. I just think there's going to be a lot of mishaps. I think it's going to take them a few years to get this together with a whole new coaching staff. It's not like these guys all came from the same place, like another team that we'll discuss later on. But I'm just not high on them for that reason. I think there's going to be a lot of issues with this. There's going to be a huge learning curve for that Oregon team. Not to mention, I don't know what Bo Nix is going to bring to the table. So Utah, UGA, I have those as lock losses when we look at the schedule. Okay, I don't think they're going to win those games. I can see them also slipping up against someone else like a BYU, a Wazoo, UCLA, Washington, Oregon State. I can see them slipping up against some of those teams. And so because of that, I'm on the under, guys. I just don't think that the coaching situation there, I'm not saying they're bad coaches by any means, but I just think having three new coaches at the most important levels of your whole organization is not a good recipe for success. In addition to that, you've got a brand new quarterback in a brand new system that's trying to be taught to everybody. So there's no continuity at the quarterback position. There's no leadership there. Not saying Bo Nix isn't a good leader, but it's hard to lead an offense when you aren't exactly 100% familiar with the offense yourself. So for that reason, again, Ducks, good team, good future, not this year.
Xan, that was eloquent, articulate. That was beautiful. Detailed reasons on why this team will not achieve 9 wins, and they're all very valid points. And I bet you the reason they're not trying to start Bo Nix, they don't forget what happened out there when they played Auburn and he threw that last second touchdown that made him the glory of the entire country and SEC Freshman of the Year. And oh yeah, anyone who knows me personally knows I definitely have some thoughts on Bo Nix. I think he's a talented player, but his time at Auburn was quite fun to watch. Um, but with all that being said, quack quack, I'm on the over, but it's over to push. It's one of those that I'm not completely that confident in, but I am on the over for this team. For the Ducks. I mean, I think UG, and for me, as many have come to know, I like to really hone in on scheduling. UGA in a road game. What's neutral site? That's funny. It's a road game. It's in Atlanta, for goodness sakes. That's an automatic loss against the defending champions. I mean, you at least you have the benefit of Utah, UCLA, Washington being at home. But if Utah's as good as we all just said, well, you might be able to chalk that one up. And then even the Civil War against Oregon State, that could be a toss-up depending on how State's looking. But even with those concerns, I am still banking on Oregon just still putting a good product out there. Dan Lanning, it's year one, and he could maybe have one of those hot year ones. He knows what a winning culture looks like coming from Georgia. And I do more so, I'm intrigued to see how Kenny Dillingham reacts with a much better quarterback. I'm not trying to be that disrespectful to what Florida State had, but I think Bo Nix is definitely kind of a tier up from what they were working with there in Tallahassee. So it's not a play that I would personally bet. It's not one that I'd go bragging about that I'm super confident in, but slightly I lean push to over on these Ducks. Quack, quack.
I'm with you guys on that. The line is pretty about right, in my opinion. I have a lean in this as well. For me, when you look at the offense and Bo Nix, really, if you look at Bo Nix' numbers at Auburn, he kind of marginally improved last year when he was at Auburn, right? He was kind of struggled his freshman year. He had that great game against Oregon, ironically, in his first game as a freshman, but then his sophomore year kind of down. Last year, he did step it up a little bit. His numbers were still pretty mediocre, but he did show that he could improve. And now he's going to be a fourth-year starter, except at a different ball club out west in Oregon. And to me, if you look at Bo Nix' numbers last year at Auburn, and then you look at Anthony Brown's numbers last year at Oregon, Anthony Brown, the former Duck quarterback, really Bo Nix doesn't really seem like a statistical upgrade over Anthony Brown, if anything. But the thing is, of course, Bo Nix was at Auburn. He played some of the best defenses in the country in the SEC West, and he will have a lot more easier of a time facing a lot worse defenses out here in the Pac-12. And I think that Bo Nix, at least statistically, he will have his best season, in my opinion. And I think that's just the fact that he's moving into the Pac-12. Now, will be that much better than what Anthony Brown was? Maybe marginally at best, but I'm with you guys there on Bo Nix, maybe not necessarily being like a massive saving grace for Oregon. I know, Xan, you hit the running backs. I actually think that Byron Cardwell, I think that he could be a pleasant surprise for this Oregon offense. If you look at his numbers in a small sample size last year, he did really well in yards per carry like CJ Verdell did. And I think that Cardwell could actually be low-key, not that bit of a drop-off at running back. And then also what I really like is their offensive line. This offensive line is elite. It has been elite. Even with the loss of Kingsley Salamatea to BYU, I think this O-line should still be one of the better in the country. And that'll certainly give them an edge in the Pac-12. And as far as the defense, I think this defense could be pretty good. Even though it's a new coaching staff and all that, I think this defense could be quietly pretty dang good this year. They were number 53 in defensive efficiency last year, which really isn't all that great. But They do return a lot of players outside of Thibodeau. I do really like that they return Noah Sewell and Brandon Dorless. Those two guys are absolute beasts. Secondary is a question mark. I will say that. But if I had to bet one way or the other, I think this defense improves from last year. And I think that's also because of Dan Lanning. He's a defensive guy. I think automatically this defense could be better just by having Lanning there. You guys already hit the schedule. Even just writing off Georgia in week 1 as a loss, I still think it's pretty possible that they can finish 10-1. I wouldn't bet on that. I think that 9 wins is just about right. And similar to ZKS, if I had to lean one way or the other, I think 10-2 is slightly more likely than 8-4. But you're really flipping a coin here. I wouldn't be shocked if I'm wrong one way or the other, but I'm going to go over for the purposes of this video. So give me the over for Oregon.
Oh, I just want to say real quick, watching Bo Nix dual Cam Rising, I think will be a sneaky, fun matchup that a lot of people will not be talking too much about when that game comes. So I'm really excited to see that.
Absolutely. And those Oregon players, when they played Utah last year, they played them at a really bad time. That was when Cristobal was, his focus was on Miami. His focus was out the door. We just didn't know it at the time. And this Oregon team was certainly not the same Oregon team that went into Columbus and beat Ohio State at the beginning of the year. And I think those Oregon Duck players with a new coaching staff, a lot more buy-in, they're going to have Utah circled. That's for sure. I think we all know that.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you can't underestimate a system. So even though Oregon's got all this talent, you still have to be able to put the pieces together. And then when you have 3 new guys, I'm just so off on that. I think 9 wins is definitely conceivable, but to me, I lean to the under because I can definitely see I'm higher on some of these more middle tier teams that they play, and I do see them dropping a game or two against them. So I'm thinking 8-4. That's where I'm going to go with this one. But you guys do make some good points.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if you end up being right about this. Like I said, it's like flipping a coin. 10-2 versus 8-4. I won't be surprised if Oregon slips up and loses a game or two they shouldn't. So now let's move on to UCLA, the Bruins. Chip Kelly coming in. He's been there quietly now, it seems like, for a good amount of time. It's his 4th or 5th season at UCLA, I believe. And their win total is sitting up at 8.5. This is a team that very quietly actually had a pretty solid season last year. And I say very quietly. They went 8-4 last year. However, UCLA, they're only 90th in returning production. That's a big red flag for this team. As far as the offense, with me going first here, DTR last year, he had pretty good numbers. It felt like last year DTR finally took that step forward that we've all been looking for, that we've been saying. It seems like every single year that DTR has been there. It's like, okay, when is he going to take that leap? When is he going to take that leap? He finally kind of did it. Maybe not as big as we would have expected him to. But one thing I will say about DTR is it seems like he's been there forever. What is this, his 3rd or 4th season as the starter? His 4th season?
Are you calling him West Coast Adrian Martinez?
He is West Coast Adrian Martinez. It feels like the guy's been there forever. But anyway, like I was saying, it felt like he finally did that. The question is, can he be better? Can he take another step forward off of last year? We don't know. I think another big piece for this UCLA offense is that Zach Charbonnet returns. Charbonnet was very good last season out of the backfield. However, they do lose their top 2 receivers last year, but they got a bunch of receiving transfers. Chip Kelly hit the transfer portal hard with this team offensively and defensively. I think that the offensive efficiency can maintain their top 20 status that they had last year as long as DTR stays healthy. That's the key for this offense, in my opinion. I don't really see too much of a drop-off or too much of an improvement one way or the other. And then as far as the defense, this is the big problem with this team. They lost 8 starters off of last year. They're projected 5 of those guys that are coming in this year. Those guys are going to be transfers that are starting. And they lost 2 of their best defensive backs, Quentin Lake to the draft, and Jay Shaw, he transferred to Wisconsin. So this secondary could take a massive step back. And I think this defense as a whole will probably take a step back. The new defensive coordinator, however, I thought this was interesting. He was the Chicago Bears linebacker coach, and now he's the new DC. So a very interesting hire there from Chip Kelly. Non-conference schedule is an absolute breeze. You want to talk about an AD that knows how to schedule correctly? They scheduled Bowling Green, Alabama State, and Southern Alabama. 3-0, cakewalk. And then you look at their schedule. I think there's a good chance UCLA could probably start 4-0, maybe even 5-0. This could be one of those teams that starts the season off hot. They're ranked in the top 25, probably maybe top 15. They're 5-0. But then we get to the Utah game. And when they go to play Utah, I would expect that to be a loss. I expect defensive regression just as a whole throughout the season. And I am pretty heavy here on the under at 8.5. I'm a little surprised it is this high. If they had a tougher schedule, this thing would certainly be lower, but I'm going to go under, and I feel pretty confident about that. I like DTR, but this defense is probably not going to be that good.
I'll say DTR. I looked it up. He's been there since 2018. So just keep that in perspective. It's amazing his longevity and ability to still stay in college and be effective. And I'm really excited to see how he does in what I would presume to be his final year, maybe.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
like you said about UCLA, I had him in the 90s as well, returning production. And by had him, I mean I looked it up and saw they were in 90s in returning production. And and also say as someone who pulls for the Chicago Bears on the side, I mean you don't ever want anyone from that organization on your staff. That never brings any good culture or
That's why I
winning
brought that up.
mentality. Ever. They're from the Saints, be a different story, but I digress. Anyways, Shoob, I mean, you hit it. I mean, I like them starting 4-0. How do you not with that non-con? I mean, and then you got Colorado. That's beautiful. But like you had said, I mean, the stretch with Washington, Utah, and Oregon, that does present some challenges. You could hit some road bumps there. I had written that 2 losses to Utah and Oregon would essentially lock up the under. It's an under, but I'm not that confident in it. I mean, this one I really spent just a good almost half hour just combing through, figuring out which side of the coin to fall on, and with the flip, I'm going with the under. If I'm going to look for more losses, USC, yeah, it's at home, but maybe that explosive offense comes in and either beats you in a blowout or in a shootout, and then I mean, maybe Arizona surprises somebody and clips you. I'd be stunned. I'd be absolutely stunned. But I definitely think there is a route to 8-4 for UCLA. Wouldn't bet my personal money on it, but let's see if DTR proves me wrong and they go 11-1, win the Pac-12, go to playoff.
Guys, I can't believe you guys. So I'm going to reiterate some points that we've made in previous pods. But first, I'm going to reiterate one part of my initial agreements, I should say. When I looked at this being 8.5, I said to myself, no way, no how. That is an easy under. There is absolutely no way UCLA is going to get that. But then I opened my handy dandy notebook and I did a little bit of research. I did a little bit of digging. And, DTR, he's got that experience. He's been there forever with continuity at the head coaching position. They had a good offense last year, 11th in efficiency. Again, the DC is, when you hire, Bill McGovern from the Bears, you're not necessarily like in the best of scenarios right now, but I don't know, trust the process, right? But Zach Charbonnet also returning is a big deal for UCLA. But this is what I want to come back to, guys. This is why I say, guys, we always talk about this. It's not about how good your team is. It's about your schedule that you get. You alluded to it a little bit already, but I really just want to put my spin on this. Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Bama, all wins. Easy non-con. Cake. Colorado, Stanford, Arizona, Cal. Probably all wins. That's 7 games already. And now you look at their other games, I think they'll lose to USC. I think they'll lose to Utah. But as you'll find out here soon, I'm not as high on some of these other teams on their schedule. We already talked about Oregon. I'm not as high on them. I see that as a toss-up game. I think they can beat Oregon. I see Arizona State. I think Arizona State is a team that's probably going to underperform this year. Spoiler alert. And I think they can beat Arizona State. And then between Washington, I think Washington's having continuity issues right now as well. So between those 3 teams, I can see them going 2-1 in that stretch. And if they go 2-1 in that stretch, that is 9 wins. And that is the over. And so for me, I think they easily have 7 wins in the bag. All they have to do is put together 2 of these more competitive games. And the over is there. And so when I was looking at this, I kept telling myself, UCLA is not that good of a team. No way, no how on this 8.5. When I initially did this, I hit under. But again, you got to look through your handy dandy notebook. And sometimes you come out with some different perspectives.
So I'm with you. I thought the exact same thing. I had the same exact approach when I first saw this line at 8.5, and I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. But then the schedule, of course, is their saving grace. UCLA is going to be in my opinion, they're going to be like the Virginia of the Pac-12, where a team that has a really high win total, we're kind of surprised it's that high, but it's because their schedule is pretty easy. It's pretty favorable. So maybe I came off too strong. Maybe I shouldn't be as confident as the under as I came off sounded initially, but I still think that 8-4 is way more likely than 9-3. I just cannot see, even with the schedule, I just cannot see UCLA winning 9 games, even like 10 games. I can't see UCLA being that team. I really just do not trust the defense at all. And
Mhm.
like I said, it's more of a program thing. It's if Chip Kelly's having to bring in all these mediocre transfers to fill in holes all over the roster in his 5th year as a head coach, you can maybe get away with that in the Pac-12. You can kind of get away with that in this conference. But when we're doing win totals here, 8.5 is just a little too high for a coach that's having to do that for his roster.
And Shub, I think it boils down to ultimately just how we see these teams, right? You and ZKS over there on the over with Oregon. I'm not as high in Oregon this year. I think they're very, very beatable this year for UCLA. So when we're coming to that, you guys are saying 8-4 on the lean. Just because we look at Oregon a little differently, I see them as a team that could beat Oregon, and that's that one extra game right there. So either way, it's not going to surprise me. UCLA, I think by their schedule, 7 games is the absolute minimal. I don't see them, but I'm thinking 8 or 9 games. I'm thinking 9 though.
Let's move on here to Washington. The Huskies, another team bringing in a brand new coaching staff. Their win total set at 7.5. Xan, lead us off.
So again, I look at Washington, and I think overall they're on a good trajectory with their program right now. They got out of a toxic relationship with their head coach. They're finally in a new regime. I mean, they are heading in the right direction. One thing I really don't like about them is they lost 2 stud corners to the NFL, Kyler Gordon, Trent McDuffie. That's a huge loss to their defense. Another thing I really, really don't like about them, and I'll preface this together because these points kind of back each other up. They were 89th in offensive efficiency last year, and their projected starting quarterback this year is going to be either Michael Penix or Dylan Morris. Neither one of those guys to me are much of a. I know you're high on Michael Penix, Shub. I know you're a big Michael Penix guy.
No, that not at all. Actually,
Okay, I
I'm low
remember
on
back in
Michael
his
Penix.
Indiana days.
No, I don't. I actually, I looked at a post from a couple of days ago from a Huskies board. Sam Heward, I think,
Sam
is the guy
Heward.
making noise right now. I think Sam
Okay,
Heward could be the guy that he was a former 5-star. I was just about to say,
I
I don't want
see.
to cut you
So
off, but you
no, no,
mentioned Morris,
I'm glad
but
you,
I
I'm
think
glad you
Heward
brought
could
that to
be the
my
guy.
attention. No, I'm glad you brought that to my attention because just recent depth charts that I've checked, it had Penix and Dylan Morris fighting for one. So
Right.
that's where I got that from. But I mean, if that's the case, even so, Heward's not proven, right? Still a
Yeah.
young guy. And so I don't see this team really making that jump. Not to mention there's a new offensive coordinator coming in from Fresno, Ryan Grubb, and the DC as well. I mean, and their new coach, Kalen DeBoer. I think honestly, I think that was a tremendous hire. This is one reason that I almost took the Washington over. Okay, because one thing I really, really love about what Washington did and why I think they have such a great future ahead of them is they brought continuity in their coaching position. Yes, they have new coaches at all 3 positions, just like Oregon. The difference is all these coaches came from the same school. They all came from Fresno. They all know each other well. They all know each other's system. In addition to that, I mean, if you just consider this, there is going to be no these guys have worked together for so long. There's going to be no misconception. There's going to be no disagreement in the coaching room. These guys all came together with a plan in mind. And how often do you see an entire coaching staff poached by one school? Like how often do you see that? You don't really see it. It's pretty unheard of. And this is what I was alluding to earlier in this pod that I really, really like this. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is 79-9 as a head coach. Can you believe that record? He's 79-9 in his career as a head coach. They
Is it
are
really that high?
definitely. Yeah, no, I looked. When I was looking him up, I was like, wow, this man's got such a winning record. Like, this is such a good hire. In addition to bringing the whole staff, and I really love that they're keeping this continuity at the position. But when I look at their schedule, I see Kent State, Portland State, Arizona, Colorado, Cal wins 5. Then you got Oregon, Wazoo, ASU, Michigan State, and then you know what? I think they'll probably beat Stanford. So give me 7 on that. They would have to win two of these other games in order to hit this over between Oregon, Wazoo, Michigan State. I don't see him doing it. I don't think they're going to. I'm pretty high on Wazoo this year. I think Michigan State is a good team, although I had them on the under, but that's not because I don't think they're a good team. And then Oregon, again, is just another team I feel is going to match up well with them. But again, I have Oregon on the under as well. But, Washington to me is just in a state of offensive. To me, I just don't trust the offense that they have right now. And in the loss of all those players on defense, and you have a new coaching staff, regardless of how much I love how that whole team came together, there's just too many question marks for me to comfortably take Washington on the over, especially given that in the middle tier of the Pac-12, I think that a lot of those teams are going to beat up on each other a little bit. So it doesn't make me very comfortable in this win total. So I took the under, but it's also not very confident. I could see them winning 8 games as well.
Yeah, just to clarify about the quarterback stuff. So I looked when I was doing my research here, and just 2 days ago from a Huskies board, they said that it was initially a 3-way battle between Penix, Sam Heward, and Dylan Morris. And Dylan Morris originally, that people are saying it's probably going to be either Morris or Penix, but apparently Morris has been slipping behind. So right now it's a 2-way battle between Penix and Sam Heward. Sam Heward, of course, is the lefty. He was a 5-star prospect back once upon a time. So it could still be Penix, but I'm just saying that right now it's a battle between those two guys.
Xan, love the point you made about Washington. It is amazing that a team that finished 4-8, the book still thinks so highly of them. They give them a 7.5 win total for this season. And looking at this squad, looking at this schedule, as I always tend to start with, the biggest thing of all that speaks to me is addition by subtraction. And here's what I mean. John Donovan is adios. Your offensive coordinator who helped you amass an awesome 21.5 points in 2021 is out the door, while your defense was giving up 22.7. Imagine giving up 22.7 points and you go 4-8 in the Pac-12. Nuts. Bonkers. Incredulous. I'm done. Anyways, so with him gone, I just by default like this offense being better than what it was in 2021. I have him here as 36 in returning production. You get 4 straight home games to open the season. Talk about treating your fans right. And I really do think that's half their wins, assuming they beat Michigan State. Who knows? Maybe that time zone change gets to the Spartans. I mean, they may have a better chance of beating Sparty than most people think. State's a decent team, but I think that's more of a toss-up than, the media might be allowing us to think. Because I know a lot of people are high on State, even after last year. Anyways, so once we get to October, which is a great month, that consists of the Arizona schools in Cal. I would be stunned if they did not sweep that month. I would almost make a show bet that they sweep that month, like $5. So nothing crazy. And then in November, yes, the Oregon schools, that's a tough draw. But then you get Colorado at home, and for all we know, they could be spiraling. Doral out the door. I mean, Colorado could be a real dumpster fire. And then as high as I am on Washington State, as we're going to be talking about later on the pod, historically, they beat him out of 7 of 8 years. And I know we sometimes get a type of way about putting a stock in old stats from teams decades ago, but there is something to be said about teams who continually beat their rival, and that gets in their head. Even if they break through and win a game here and there, there's still something to be said about continually beating your rival. So with all that in mind, I do see this team being at least an 8-4 squad, and I'm on the over. And John Donovan, again, is probably the biggest reason for that.
John Donovan, the biggest reason for the over.
Yeah,
I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you that he was just an awful offensive coordinator, and I know Husky fans probably are just so happy just to see them gone. As far as Kalen DeBoer, we'll stop talking about Jimmy Lake. I'm sure Washington fans don't want to hear that name ever again. But
academically superior, they are.
Yeah, that was a wild quote from last year.
That was a big brain hire, 79-9.
So Kalen DeBoer, he brings out a lot of the staff from Fresno State. You guys already hit that. The offense last year, for as much crap as we're giving them, they were 89th in offensive efficiency last year, which still was not good, but it wasn't like bottom 30. Which I was kind of surprised about. It wasn't like bottom 30, but it was still really bad. I think that, like you said, ZKS by default, better play calling, better offensive development. It may take some time this year, but the offense should be better this season with just a new voice, a new play caller in the room. I think that this will be a team offensively, especially once they figure out who their quarterback is going to be, or if they use multiple quarterbacks and get that stuff figured out. I think this is an offense that improves as the season goes on, gets better, and by the end of the year, they're probably hitting on all cylinders. As far as the defense, though, this is what Washington's made a name for itself in recent memory for their defense. They did add 2 new linebacker transfer starters. You already hit Xan on the DBs they lost to the draft. D-line was actually one of the worst in FBS last year in line yards, which was kind of surprising. But again, with the Pac-12, it's kind of skewed. But the defensive line needs to improve. This defense is going to continue to be good, especially when you're playing teams like Oregon and Utah and USC that are going to be having better than average offensive lines. As far as the schedule, should be 2-0 in the non-con before Michigan State comes into town. Michigan State is a massive toss-up game for this win total. If they beat Michigan State, there's a good chance Washington can hit this over. But if they lose to Michigan State, I think that game is going to be really telling of how good this team is and whether or not they're going to hit this win total or go under.
I'm with you, Shoob. I really do think that Michigan State game is going to determine if they hit this win total or not.
So my final verdict here, I'm leaning towards the under, and I was very wishy-washy about this. I originally was thinking over, but I decided to go under at the last second for a lot of the same reasons that you said, Xan. I think it's going to take a bit of time for DeBoer to get his system in place here, but this is certainly a team that beyond this year, 2023, 2024, I think that this is a program that's got a big upside, a big green arrow next to them, but it may not all click right away this season. But I will say, though, as far as this year and as far as the schedule, as far as Pac-12 play is concerned, they avoid Utah and USC. So I didn't even realize that when I was talking about the lack of them playing good offensive lines, they don't even have to play Utah or USC this year, which is a huge advantage schedule-wise. So we could be wrong about this, but I'm going to go under. It's a toss-up for me, coin flip. We'll see. I think, like you said, I think there's some teams like Oregon State, Washington State. There's some teams that maybe could clip them in the middle of the Pac-12.
I do love their future. Oh, go ahead, ZKS.
It's just the Michigan State game. I really do think that's your coin flipper there. They win that, 100%. They're sitting really pretty to hit this over. They don't, much tougher climb uphill.
Yeah, absolutely. They beat Michigan State. They're going to hit this over. But, I mean, just like you said, bringing in all those coordinators from Fresno, I love the continuity in that. And I think just because of that, they are on a great path to be successful in the future, even if they don't hit this over. So Washington Husky fans, don't fret too much.
I just wanted to say really quick, imagine if Jake Haener had followed through with his transfer to Washington. How differently would we be talking about this team?
I'd be on the over.
Oh, absolutely.
I would be on the over.
If Haener was the QB,
more confident.
Oh, boy.
Over.
I really wish he made the transfer, man, because this Washington team would have been so fun to watch.
I had to throw that in there because that definitely would have spiced things up. That's for sure. So now let's move on here down to Arizona State. Boy, Arizona State, they sure haven't made any sort of headlines or anything off the field in recent months.
Ding,
Awkward
ding, ding.
silence. So Arizona State, it goes without saying, they are the Auburn of the Pac-12. Arizona State, they could have a situation here with Herm Edwards as a lame duck head coach, but for the sake of giving them the benefit of the doubt, we're going to discuss this team here for this season. This win total, believe it or not, this win total opened up at 7.5. It opened up at 7.5, and this thing got absolutely clobbered. The under got absolutely clobbered. This line, I think, has moved more than any other line for any FBS team. I'm pretty sure it moved a game and a half, which is very rare. That's a lot. That's a lot of movement if you guys aren't familiar with betting. But anyhow, Herm Edwards, he comes back to coach this season. They return they are 92nd overall in FBS in returning production, which is not the greatest. Offensively, they lose quarterback Jaden Daniels to transfer out to LSU, who really regressed last season. It was very odd to see what happened to Jaden Daniels after that 2020 season, that 2019 season when he was a freshman. He really lit it up, and we thought Arizona State had a very bright future ahead of them just 2 or 3 years ago. And he really regressed last season. As I said, they bring in Emory Jones, a transfer from Florida, to fill in the quarterback position. And as far as the rest of their skill positions. They lost Rashad White to the draft, and they also lost Ricky Pearsall, who, believe it or not, was their leading receiver. He transferred to Florida. And only 4 starters returned total offensively. Now, if you look at Emory Jones last season, there's a chance that he still could put up decent numbers and maybe match or maybe even be better than what Jaden Daniels was, because Jaden Daniels really fell off last year, at least statistically. And Emory Jones, of course, playing easier defenses out in the Pac-12 than what he faced at Florida. They might still get decent production out of Emory Jones, but I think with Emory Jones, you have a ceiling cap there at quarterback. He still did really struggle at Florida, and there's a reason why he had to transfer out. He did struggle throwing interceptions, and I just feel like there's a ceiling here for this Arizona State offense. It's not very high, and I don't think it's going to be very good, quite frankly. And as far as the defense, they also only returned 4 starters. Arizona State only returns 8 total starters off last year's team. They lost 3 of those guys to the draft, and they just lost a lot of good depth defensively. They lost to the transfer portal. And then when you look at their schedule, if you look at their non-con, they probably should be 2-1. They got to go at Oklahoma State, which is going to be pretty tough. I believe that they will be about a 10-point favorite or 10-point underdog, in that game. I would imagine they lose that game. And then if you look at their Pac-12 schedule, the second half is easier. But when I look at this play here, it's the scheduling dynamics. When you have a coach that could potentially be a lame duck head coach, if they start the season with a tough schedule, that's just going to accelerate Herm Edwards could get fired. Herm Edwards could be let go at the end of this year. That's just going to accelerate all that. And a lot of their tougher teams, they all are at the beginning of the schedule. I think there's a very good chance that Arizona State, worst case scenario, they start off the year 2-4. If they start the year as bad as 2-4, it's really going to accelerate those rumblings. And the second half, the schedule is easier. But at that point, if the bottom falls out, this team could lose a lot of those games they probably shouldn't lose to the middle and lower tier of the Pac-12. And for all that lame duck head coach downside I foresee, I'm going to go with the under. It's the same exact reason why I'm picking the under for Auburn in our previous SEC win totals. Hey, if the NCAA decides to come down with those sanctions just for whatever reason in the middle of the season, boy, that would definitely accelerate the process. But yeah, Arizona State, things aren't looking too good right now for them in the near future.
Xan Shoob, I got 2 words for y'all. Free money. This is free money that you're giving me this team at 6 wins. This should be at a 4.5, heck, even a 3.5.
Wow,
Let me just talk about.
Okay.
Let me talk about the recruiting class.
Don't get too crazy.
I know that's future, but they've got 6 guys. 6 guys. And of those 6, 4 of them are 3 stars. The recruiting is going down the toilet. I would love to see what the odds are, because sportsbooks have them, of Herm Edwards getting fired. I would never advocate for anybody losing their job, but the writing is looking like it's on the wall. And if they have a slow start, he's gone. You're not going to get through the season. You're going to get rid of him. I'm going to tell you when I think they might get rid of him. When you hit that slate from September 24th through October 8th, when you get beat down by Utah, USC, and then Washington comes in there and embarrasses you, he's gone for the bye week. So that's an early prediction right there. October 15th, Herm gets canned. So with all that being
too, I love it.
With all that being, yes, right after, not too long after my birthday. So of course I'm on the under on this. Let me tell you, Jaden Daniels, yes, left out here for LSU. He may not even win the starting job, to be honest, out here. Then Emory Jones comes in from UF. Honestly, in my opinion, it's not much of an upgrade. And here's the stats to back that up, though. So Daniels, 67.2 QBR last year. Emory, 69.4. Granted, Emory was playing Georgia. He was playing SEC competition, so you do got to factor that in. But all in all, not a radical difference between the two. And just for the sake of saying what wins I could see on this schedule, you would think Northern Arizona, Eastern Michigan, hopefully the covers too, or I guess lack thereof covers, if you took them in a fade draft potentially. And then in conference, maybe they beat Colorado, maybe you like that shot, and then Arizona and Stanford, but even those two maybe could be toss-ups. So I am very confident, almost best bet territory, in taking under 6 wins for ASU Sun Devils. And I hope whoever they get in there at coach can help bring them back to the heights that they kind of got a taste of a few years back.
You guys, Everything you guys just said, reiterated 1,000%, nail on the head, seal the coffin for ASU. I'm also on the under. Let's not mention that they're only down to 70 scholarship athletes right now at the moment. So that puts them at another disadvantage from a competitive and depth standpoint. So again, let's go back to Emory Jones. I don't think that man could hit a puddle if he was standing in it. I really don't see him as a very good quarterback. I think he's been heavily over-evaluated his entire career. I mean, just look back to this time last year. Just let's go back 365 days. 365 days ago, PFF was over here projecting Emory Jones as a top 5 pick. Shoob and I were saying, what? What?
I remember that.
There is absolutely no way Emory Jones will be lucky if he gets drafted. And lo and behold, I mean, Emory Jones transfers out, and the proof is in the pudding. I am totally with you guys. You mentioned a 2-4 start. Shoob, you mentioned a potential 2-4 start. ZKS, you mentioned that happens. Gone. I totally see it both ways. 100%. Northern Arizona, okay, they'll win, they'll feel good, they'll throw their little party, they'll go get, it's Arizona, it's Tempe, it's Arizona State, they'll go get drunk, they'll party, whatnot, they'll come out sluggish, get beat by Oklahoma State, and then they'll go, beat Eastern Michigan, feel really good about themselves, they're above 500, go party again, it is Tempe, I mean, and the reason I keep saying this, I'm not trying to be derogatory towards Arizona State or the players by any means, but the reason I say this is because I hear that there is a major culture problem in Herman Edwards' program as well. There's not a lot of discipline in that program. Just everything I've been reading from articles says that there is just a rotten fruit in the grapevine. And that is definitely matriculating down into the players and how that they see the program and how they train and prepare. And not to mention that you are in one of the biggest party college towns in the entire United States. It doesn't bode well. But they're going to go to Utah. Utah's probably going to beat them down. I'm sorry. USC is probably going to beat them down. I'm sorry. Washington, they might not get beat down, but they're probably going to lose that game. It is early season, so they might be a little more competitive then. But after they lose that, these guys are going to go in full quit mode. Just like Shoob said with the Auburn factor, they're going to go into full quit mode, especially if ZKS's prediction comes right here. And after that Washington loss, Herm is out the door. If that happens, kiss it goodbye. This team is easily going under. I do not see any way that they go over unless they just somehow have a miraculous start where they go 3-0, beat Oklahoma State, and then maybe steal one of the Utah, USC, Washington games. That's the only way I can see them hitting the over. And I just don't see that happening, especially with the issues that they're having there with their program. So 100% guys, consensus under. I really just do not think the Arizona State Sun Devils are going to be good this year, even though they had an 8-5 season last year. So I'm sorry
when you mentioned the culture problem with Herm Edwards, I personally, I like Herm. I've always liked Herm Edwards, but it maybe not be all him. I've heard that it's a lot of it was assistant coaches and stuff that he's had, but at the end of the day, he's still the head man. He's still the head coach. Allegedly, their athletic director at Arizona State is in love with Herm Edwards. He loves Herm. He's very loyal to Herm Edwards. And that's mainly the reason why he hasn't been fired yet. If you look at just this program, here's the good news for Arizona State. This is a program with a lot of upside. This is a sleeping giant. This could be a program that if I had to say a good comparison for Arizona State's potential, I would say Arizona State could be the Texas A&M of the Pac-12. There's that upside there. The recruits want to play in Tempe. It's a great spot. It's a great location. They got some money. It's a program that could be good. But as for all the reasons we've said, it's looking more likely than not as Herm is a lame duck head coach. I think 6 wins is a ceiling. I'd be shocked if Arizona State wins more than 7 games or more. All right, guys, so that'll do it for today's video. We did the first half of this Pac-12 win totals graphic here. If you want to check out the second half of this win totals, we'll upload another video here shortly in a few days. But leave a like if you guys enjoyed this video, and always leave comments, especially if you're a Pac-12 fan, if you're a fan of one of these teams. Let us know what you think about your team. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see y'all later.
I'm blessed.